A down-on-his-luck janitor, drowning in debt, receives a mysterious key to an abandoned train car. Inside, he finds a fortune, but the real shock comes when he learns who left it for him. This is a story about second chances, buried secrets, and the life-changing power of an unexpected legacy. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and turn on notifications. Stories like this remind us that hope can appear in the most unexpected places. The last straw. The alarm clock blared at 4:30 a.m., its shrill beat slicing through the silence of Martin Riggs' cramped apartment. He groaned, rolling onto his side, his back protesting from another night on the lumpy couch. The bed in the other room was empty. His wife, Linda, had been admitted to the hospital again, this time for another round of tests. The doctors used words like aggressive and stage 4, but Martin refused to let them sink in. Not yet. He sat up, rubbing his face with callous hands. The apartment smelled of stale coffee and desperation. The kitchen counter was littered with unopened bills, red stamps screaming final notice, and a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey. He ignored both, opting instead for the last clean mug in the sink. The coffee pot sputtered its last drops into his cup, weak and bitter, just like his luck. Martin Riggs was 52 years old, a janitor at Midway Storage Solutions, and drowning. His paycheck barely covered rent, let alone Linda's mounting medical bills. The last time he'd checked his bank account, the number had been so low it felt like a punch to the gut. And now, with his hours cut to part-time, he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep treading water. He pulled on his work boots, the soles worn thin from years of scrubbing floors and hauling trash. The left one had a hole near the toe, and he could already feel the Chicago winter creeping in. He glanced at the framed photo on the wall. Him and Linda, years ago, standing in front of Lake Michigan, back when life still held promise. Back before the diagnosis, before the debt collectors started calling, before the world decided to kick him while he was down. The walk to the bus stop was cold, the wind biting through his threadbare jacket. He shoved his hands into his pockets, fingers brushing against the crumpled eviction notice he'd gotten yesterday. 3 days to pay, or they'd be out on the street. Work passed in a blur of mop water and fluorescent lights. His supervisor, a smug kid half his age named Derek, made a point to remind him that corporate was tightening budgets and that maybe it was time to consider retirement. Martin bit his tongue. He needed this job, even if it barely paid anything. When his shift ended, he trudged back to the bus stop, his body aching. The bus was late, as usual, and by the time he got home, the sky was dark. He fumbled with his keys, exhaustion weighing him down. Then he saw it, a certified letter propped against his door. Martin frowned. Nobody sent him certified mail. Bills came in flimsy envelopes, and anything else was usually a scam. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands. The return address was a law firm, Harrison & Lowe, attorneys at law, somewhere downtown. Inside there was no letter, just a single tarnished key and a slip of paper with 4 words. Boxcar number 417. Claim it. Martin stared at the key, his pulse picking up. This had to be a mistake. Or a joke. Or worse, some kind of setup. But the key felt real in his palm, heavy with possibility. He spent the night tossing and turning, the key burning a hole in his mind. By dawn, he made up his mind. If this was a prank, fine. But if it wasn't, the old rail yard was on the outskirts of the city, a graveyard of rusted tracks and forgotten trains. Weeds sprouted between the ties, and the air smelled of oil and decay. Boxcar number 417 sat at the far end, its red paint peeling, its door sealed shut. Martin hesitated. This was stupid. He was probably about to walk into some kind of trap. But then he thought of Linda, of the eviction notice, of the hospital bills. He slid the key into the lock. It turned with a heavy click. The door groaned as he pushed it open, daylight spilling into the darkness. Dust swirled in the air, catching the light like gold. And then he saw it, stacks of them, neat bound, filling the entire back of the train car. Bearer bonds. Martin's breath left his body. He stumbled forward, his fingers brushing the crisp paper. The numbers on them didn't make sense at first. Too many zeros. Then he did the math. $80 million. His legs gave out. He hit the floor of the boxcar, his heart hammering. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be his. Then something fluttered from between the stacks. A faded photograph, landing face up in the dust. Martin picked it up, and the world stopped. The man in the photo was younger, but there was no mistaking that face. His father, the man who'd walked out 30 years ago and never came back. And written on the back, in shaky handwriting, "If you're reading this, I'm already gone, and I'm sorry." The ghost of the past. Martin sat frozen in the boxcar, the photograph trembling in his hands. The face staring back at him was unmistakable. His father, James Riggs, younger but with the same sharp jawline, the same guarded eyes. The man who had vanished when Martin was just a boy, leaving behind nothing but a half-empty closet and a lifetime of unanswered questions. And now this, a fortune in bearer bonds, a key to a locked train car, a message from beyond the grave. Martin's breath came in short, uneven bursts. He forced himself to stand, his legs unsteady. The bonds were real. The money was real, but none of it made sense. He stuffed a handful of the bonds into his jacket pocket, just enough to prove he wasn't hallucinating, and carefully locked the boxcar behind him. The key felt heavier now, like it carried the weight of decades. The law office of Harrison and Lowe was in a downtown high-rise, the kind of place with marble floors and hushed voices. Martin stood in the lobby, acutely aware of how out of place he looked, his worn-out work boots, his grease-stained jeans. The receptionist eyed him with polite suspicion. "Can I help you?" "I need to speak to someone about James Riggs," Martin said, his voice rough. "I'm his son." A pause. Then 1 moment. 5 minutes later, a tall man in a tailored suit appeared. "Mr. Riggs? I'm Daniel Harrison. Come with me." The office was all dark wood and leather, the kind of room that smelled like money. Harrison sat behind his desk, steepling his fingers. "I've been expecting you," he said. Martin's stomach tightened. "You knew I'd come?" "Your father's instructions were very specific. The key was to be delivered to you only if certain conditions were met." "What conditions?" Harrison hesitated, then slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a will, James Riggs' last testament, and a single sentence underlined in red ink. "My son inherits everything, but only if he agrees to uncover the truth." Martin's throat went dry. "What truth?" Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Your father was involved in something dangerous, something he couldn't walk away from. He spent years hiding those bonds, protecting them for you." "For me?" Martin's voice cracked. "He walked out on us. He didn't give a damn about me or my mother." Harrison's expression softened. "It's never that simple, Martin. Your father was trying to protect you." "From what?" Before Harrison could answer, the office door burst open. A woman in a sharp pantsuit strode in, her heels clicking against the floor. "Mr. Harrison, we have a problem," she said, then stopped when she saw Martin. Her eyes flicked to the folder on the desk. Harrison stood abruptly. "Not now, Sarah." But Sarah didn't move. Instead, she studied Martin with a cold, calculating gaze. "So you're James Riggs' son." Martin didn't like her tone. "Who are you?" "Sarah Voss. I represent the interests of Midwestern Rail." The name hit Martin like a slap. Midwestern Rail, the company his father had worked for before he disappeared. Harrison's jaw tightened. "This is a private meeting, Sarah." Sarah ignored him, stepping closer to Martin. "You look just like him, you know. Same stubborn chin." She tapped the folder. "Be careful what you dig up, Mr. Riggs. Some secrets are buried for a reason." Then she was gone, leaving behind a silence so thick Martin could taste it. Harrison exhaled sharply. "You need to be careful. Midwestern Rail isn't just a company. It's an empire, and they don't like loose ends." Martin's mind raced. "Why aren't you telling me?" Harrison hesitated, then reached into his desk drawer. He pulled out an old newspaper clipping, yellow with age. The headline sent a chill down Martin's spine. "Rail worker vanishes after accident. Cover-up alleged." The photo showed a younger version of his father, standing beside a mangled train car. 30 years ago, a Midwestern Rail freight derailed. Harrison said quietly, Officially, it was an accident, but your father knew the truth. The brakes were faulty. The company knew, and they sent that train out anyway. People died, and when your father threatened to go public, he disappeared. Martin's hands clenched into fists. You're saying they killed him? I'm saying the bonds in that boxcar weren't just an inheritance. They were blood money, hush money. And now that you have them, you're a target. The weight of it crashed over Martin. This wasn't just about money. It was about revenge, about justice. And as he left the office, the bonds heavy in his pocket, one thought burned in his mind. They thought they'd buried the truth. But he was just getting started. The hunt begins. The moment Martin stepped out of Harrison and Lowe, the city felt different. The air was sharper, the sounds more pronounced. The honking of taxis, the murmur of pedestrians, even the distant wail of siren all seemed amplified, as if the world had tilted slightly off its axis. He clutched the folder Harrison had given him, the edges digging into his palm like a silent warning. His first instinct was to go to Linda. She deserved to know about the money, about the bonds, about the fact that their lives might finally change. But as he reached for his phone, he hesitated. What would he even say? Hey, honey, my dead father left us millions, but oh, by the way, it might get us killed? No, he needed answers first. Instead, he ducked into a corner diner, the kind of place with sticky tabletops and coffee that had been brewing since dawn. He slid into a booth by the window, his back to the wall, and spread out the contents of the folder. The newspaper clipping stared up at him. The grainy photo of his father like a ghost from past. Rail worker vanishes after accident. Cover-up alleged. The article was vague, full of bureaucratic jargon, and carefully worded denials from Midwestern Rail. No outright accusations, just enough insinuation to raise eyebrows. His father had been quoted, calling for an investigation. And then nothing, like he'd vanished into thin air. Martin flipped through the rest of the documents. There were legal filings, heavily redacted, and a handwritten note in his father's cramped script. If they're reading this, it means I didn't make it. Don't trust the lawyers. Don't trust the police. Find Charlie Winslow. He knows the truth. Charlie Winslow. The name meant nothing to Martin, but it was a start. The Midwestern Rail corporate headquarters loomed over the Chicago River, a glass and steel monument to power. Martin stood across the street, watching suited figures stride in and out, their faces set in expressions of bored importance. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Some sign of guilt, maybe, or a clue that would lead him to Charlie Winslow. Then he saw her. Sarah Voss. She exited the building with two men in dark suits, their heads bent together in conversation. Martin ducked behind a newsstand, his pulse kicking up. He wasn't ready to face her again, not without more information. But as he watched, she broke away from the group, heading toward a parked black sedan. On impulse, Martin followed. He kept his distance, weaving to the lunchtime crowd, his eyes locked on her. She didn't look back. Confident, untouchable, the kind of person who never expected to be tailed by a janitor in a second-hand jacket. The sedan pulled into traffic, and Martin barely managed to flag down a cab in time. "Follow that car," he said, sliding into the back seat. The cabbie, a grizzled man with a toothpick dangling from his lips, raised an eyebrow. "You serious?" "Dead serious." The cabbie shrugged and hit the gas. They trailed the sedan across the city, away from the gleaming downtown towers, and into an industrial district of warehouses and loading docks. The sedan finally stopped outside a nondescript building with a faded sign, WRKZ Mechanical Repairs. Sarah Voss stepped out and disappeared inside. Martin paid the cabbie and approached cautiously. The building looked abandoned, but the sedan was still there, engine ticking as it cooled. He circled around back, where a rusted fire escape offered a way up to the second floor. The window was cracked open, just enough to hear voices inside. "Don't care what Harrison told him," Sarah was saying, her voice sharp. "We contain this now or we all go down." A man's voice, low and gravelly, responded. "You really think the janitor's going to be a problem? He's James Riggs' son. That makes him a problem." Martin's breath caught. Then, another voice, one that sent a chill down his spine. "Find Winslow before he does." Martin didn't wait to hear more. He backed away, his mind racing. They were looking for Charlie Winslow, too, and if they found him first. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. They're watching your apartment. Don't go home. Martin stared at the message, his blood turning to ice. He was in way over his head, but there was no turning back now. The truth unravels. Martin stared at the text message, the words burning into his retinas. They're watching your apartment. His fingers tightened around the phone. Who had sent this? Harrison? Someone else? And more importantly, where the hell was he supposed to go now? The wind howled through the industrial district, carrying the scent of oil and rust. He needed to move. If Midwestern Rail was watching his place, they'd be tracking his phone too. He powered it off, the screen going black. For the first time in years, he was truly alone. His mind raced. Charlie Winslow. That was the key. Find him before Sarah Voss did. But how? The only clue was a repair shop, WRKZ Mechanical. Maybe someone there knew something. Martin circled back to the front of the building. A flickering neon sign in the window read open, but the place looked deserted. The bell jingled as he stepped inside, the smell of grease and metal thick in the air. Help you? A man in oil-stained coveralls emerged from the back, wiping his hands on a rag. Late 50s salt and pepper hair. A tattoo of an anchor peeking out from his collar. His name tag read Hank. Martin hesitated. I'm looking for Charlie Winslow. Hank's expression didn't change, but his fingers twitched around the rag. Ain't heard that name in years. You knew him? Everyone knew Charlie. Hank tossed the rag onto the counter. Why you asking? Martin weighed his options. Lie and risk losing Hank's trust. Or tell the truth and risk everything. He worked with my father, James Riggs. Hank went very still. Then, without a word, he walked to the front door, flipped the sign to close, and locked it. You better come with me. The back room was a cluttered maze of engine parts and yellow paperwork. Hank cleared off a chair, gesturing for Martin to sit. Charlie was a good man, he said, rummaging through a filing cabinet. Best mechanic Midwestern Rail ever had. But he asked too many questions. About the derailment? Hank paused, then pulled out a dusty folder. Inside were photographs, grainy, decades old. One showed a group of rail workers, his father among them, standing beside a locomotive. Another showed a younger Hank and a wiry man with a sharp grin. Charlie, presumably, holding up a wrench like a trophy. But it was the third photo that made Martin's breath catch. A train car, twisted and broken, bodies covered in sheets. And in the corner, barely visible, a man in a suit watching it all. A man who looked eerily like the current CEO of Midwestern Rail. Charlie kept records. Hank said quietly, evidence. He knew the brakes were faulty, knew the company covered it up, and when he threatened to go public, he trailed off. Martin's throat tightened. What happened to him? Hank's jaw clenched. They said he skipped town. But Charlie wouldn't have left without telling me. He slid a key across the table, smaller than the one for the boxcar, tarnished with age. Storage unit, over on 12th, Charlie's stuff. If there's answers, they're there. Martin pocketed the key. Why help me? Hank met his eyes. Because your old man saved my life once. And because I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. The storage facility was a maze of corrugated metal, the kind of place where things and people could disappear. Martin found Unit 42, his pulse hammering. The key turned smoothly. Inside was a single filing cabinet and a dusty toolbox. He yanked open the top drawer and froze. Blueprints, maintenance logs, and a handwritten ledger detailing every faulty part Midwestern Rail had ever ignored. At the bottom of the pile was a cassette tape labeled JR Final Statement. Martin's hands shook as he pulled it out. His father's voice. After 30 years of silence, he needed a way to play it. The storage facility office had an old tape deck behind the counter. The clerk, a bored teenager with earbuds in, barely glanced up as Martin slipped him a 20 and borrowed it. He pressed play. Static, then, if you're hearing this, they found me. Don't trust the lawyers. Don't trust the police. The bonds are your insurance. Use them to make it right. And Martin, I'm sorry. A noise behind him. Martin spun, just in time to see Sarah Voss step into unit, a gun leveled at his chest. "Hello, Mr. Riggs," she said, smiling. "Let's talk about those bonds." Redemption. Martin's blood turned to ice as Sarah Voss stepped closer, the barrel of her gun unwavering. The cassette tape suddenly felt heavy in his hand. His father's last words, and now possibly his own. "You're smarter than you look," Sarah said, her voice smooth as polished steel. "But not smart enough to walk away from $80 million. Martin forced himself to breathe. The storage unit was cramped, the only exit blocked by Sarah and her gun. His mind raced. Think. But all he could hear was his father's voice on the tape. "Don't trust the lawyers. Don't trust the police. Midwestern Rail killed my father," Martin said, his voice steadier than he felt. "And now you're here to finish the job?" Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm here to make a deal. The bonds for your life." Simple. A deal. Martin almost laughed. Like the deal they'd offered his father before he disappeared. Like the deal Charlie Winslow had gotten. But he wasn't his father. He glanced at the toolbox beside him, rusted but solid, heavy enough to do damage. "You really think I'd hand them over?" Martin said, shifting his weight slightly. "After everything?" Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. "I think you don't have a choice." Martin moved. He lunged for the toolbox, swinging it hard. Sarah fired. The shot ricocheted off the metal shelves. But Martin was already on her, slamming the toolbox into her wrist. The gun clattered to the floor. Sarah snarled, kicking out, her heel connecting with his ribs. Pain flared, but Martin didn't let go. He drove her back against the filing cabinet, the metal groaning under their weight. "You don't know what you're messing with," Sarah spat. "This goes higher than you can imagine." Martin didn't care. He twisted, pinning her arm behind her back. "Tell me who gave the order. Who killed my father?" Sarah laughed, breathless. "You'll never prove it." Behind them, the storage unit door creaked open. Martin tensed, expecting another gun, another threat. But it was Hank, gripping a tire iron like a bat. "You okay, kid?" Relief flooded Martin's veins. Yeah, I'm good," Sarah thrashed. But Hank was already pulling zip ties from his pocket. "Charlie always said they'd come back someday," he muttered, securing her wrists. Guess he was right. The police found Sarah's car parked 2 blocks away, the trunk filled with files, decades of Midwestern Rail's cover-ups, bribes, and worse. The cassette tape and Charlie's ledger were the final nails in the coffin. By morning, the story was everywhere. Decades-old rail cover-up exposed. CEO arrested in connection with fatal derailment. Martin stood outside the courthouse, Linda's hand in his. The bonds were theirs now, free and clear, no conditions, no shadows. "You okay?" Linda asked softly. Martin looked up at the sky, clear for the first time in years. "Yeah," he said, "I think I am." What would you have done in Martin's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story reminded you that even the darkest secrets can't stay buried forever, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of justice and redemption. Because everyone deserves a second chance.